In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the insane fan theories of The Simpsons. Let's begin. The entire Simpson family dynamic may be occurring inside Homer's fractured mind as he lies comatose in a hospital bed. This theory, originally proposed on Reddit over a decade ago, suggests that everything after the "so it's come to this" episode represents Homer's brain trying to process his life while trapped in a vegetative state. According to this theory, the 1993 April Fool's prank that left Homer in a coma marks the actual end of his conscious life, with every subsequent episode taking place entirely within his dying mind. This theory emerged in Simpsons fan communities around 2006 to 2007, when viewers began noticing the show's dramatic tonal shift after season 4. Fans observed that the series became increasingly absurd and reality-defying after Homer's hospitalization episode, suggesting these weren't creative choices, but rather the logical inconsistencies we'd expect from a deteriorating consciousness. The theory gained momentum when fans cataloged how the show's grounded early humor gave way to impossible scenarios involving celebrities, time travel, and supernatural events. In "So It's Come to This," a Simpsons clip show, we see Homer hospitalized after Bart's April Fool's prank involving an exploding beer can. The episode shows Homer lying motionless in a hospital bed while his family gathers around him, with the entire middle section consisting of flashbacks to earlier episodes. This structure itself mirrors how coma patients' brains might replay memories while consciousness fades. When Homer finally wakes up, the episode treats it as a miraculous recovery. But what if he never actually woke up? What if everything that followed represents his mind's desperate attempt to continue his life through imagination? The evidence becomes clear when examining the show's timeline inconsistencies after this episode. The Simpson children never age despite decades passing in our world. Bart remains perpetually 10 years old, Lisa stays 8, and Maggie never grows beyond infancy. In normal reality, this would be impossible, but in a coma patient's mind, time doesn't function normally. Homer's consciousness keeps his family frozen at the ages he last saw them, unable to process the passage of time because his brain exists outside of time. Most telling is how the show embraces increasingly impossible scenarios. The family travels to other countries, meets countless celebrities, experiences supernatural events, and survives situations that should kill them. These aren't just cartoon logic, they're dream logic. Homer's mind creates elaborate fantasies where his family remains safe and together, regardless of how absurd the circumstances become. The character behavior changes also support this interpretation. In early seasons, Homer was crude but relatively intelligent, capable of complex problem-solving and emotional growth. After the coma episode, his intelligence deteriorates dramatically, his behavior becomes more childish, and he seems unable to learn from experience. This mirrors how brain function declines in coma patients as neurons die. The Homer we see in later seasons isn't the real Homer. He's Homer's idealized self-image from his dying consciousness, simplified and exaggerated as his brain loses capacity for nuance. The theory explains why Springfield itself becomes increasingly surreal. The town's geography changes constantly, impossible businesses appear and disappear, and the population seems to shift based on narrative needs. In early seasons, Springfield felt like a real place with consistent locations and logical layout. After Homer's coma, it becomes dreamlike and fluid, changing to accommodate whatever scenario Homer's mind invents. Real places don't work this way. Dream places do. Most damning is how the show treats consequences. In early seasons, major events had lasting impacts. Homer's actions affected his family, characters remembered past episodes, and Springfield evolved over time. After the coma episode, consequences disappear. The family house gets destroyed and rebuilt instantly. Characters die and return. Major life changes get reset to baseline. This isn't poor writing, it's how dreams work. Each episode represents a different dream sequence, with Homer's mind resetting conditions to maintain his fantasy of family stability. This interpretation transforms The Simpsons from an animated sitcom into a heartbreaking portrait of a dying man's consciousness, where every bizarre adventure represents Homer's brain desperately clinging to memories of his family while his body lies motionless in a Springfield hospital bed. The show's endless run isn't creative longevity, it's Homer's mind refusing to let go, generating infinite scenarios to avoid confronting that his real life ended in 1993. If Homer's trapped in his mind, then maybe other family members face their own psychological prisons. The next theory explores Bart's dark secret. What if Bart Simpson's troublemaking behavior isn't rebellious spirit, but neurological damage from decades of environmental toxins? This theory suggests that Bart suffers from severe lead poisoning that explains his impulsivity, learning difficulties, and inability to understand consequences. Throughout the series, Bart displays classic symptoms of heavy metal poisoning: attention deficit problems, poor impulse control, academic failure despite average intelligence, and difficulty connecting actions to consequences. These aren't character traits, they're medical symptoms. This theory developed in online Simpsons communities around 2009 to 2010, when fans began analyzing Springfield's well-documented environmental catastrophe. The theory gained support when viewers connected Bart's behavioral issues to the show's frequent references to toxic waste, nuclear contamination, and industrial pollution that saturates every corner of Springfield. Medical professionals participating in online discussions noted that Bart's symptoms precisely match those of children exposed to lead during critical developmental periods. The evidence becomes clear when examining Springfield's environment. The nuclear power plant operates without meaningful safety protocols, regularly leaking radiation into the air and water supply. Homer works in direct contact with radioactive materials without proper protection, bringing contamination home on his clothing and skin. The Simpson house itself, built decades ago, almost certainly contains lead paint that deteriorates into toxic dust. Bart has breathed this poison his entire life, accumulating damage that explains his behavioral patterns. In Brothers Little Helper, we see Bart diagnosed with attention deficit disorder and prescribed medication to control his behavior. The episode treats this as a chemical imbalance requiring pharmaceutical intervention. But what if the real cause isn't genetic neurology, but environmental neurotoxins? Lead poisoning causes the exact symptoms Bart displays: hyperactivity, inability to focus, poor academic performance, and impulsive decision-making. The school system medicates him, rather than investigating whether Springfield's toxic environment is destroying children's brains. Most revealing is Bart's consistent academic failure, despite moments that prove he possesses normal intelligence. When motivated, Bart demonstrates problem-solving skills, creativity, and strategic thinking that should translate to academic success. He orchestrates elaborate pranks requiring planning and execution. He navigates complex social situations. He shows genuine cleverness in scenarios that interest him. Yet he fails every subject, accumulates thousands of hours of detention, and cannot seem to learn from mistakes. This pattern matches lead poisoning victims perfectly. Normal underlying intelligence impaired by neurological damage that prevents focus, memory formation, and impulse control. The theory explains why Bart's behavior never improves despite years of detention, punishment, and intervention. Lead damage is permanent. No amount of discipline can repair neurons destroyed by heavy metal exposure. Every authority figure in Bart's life treats his behavior as a choice requiring correction through punishment. None of them consider that his brain has been physically damaged by the environment they've allowed to poison him since birth. Principal Skinner punishes him endlessly. Homer strangles him regularly. The school system has given up on his education. All of them are punishing a child for symptoms of poisoning they caused. Springfield's other children show similar dysfunction, suggesting widespread contamination. Ralph Wiggum displays severe cognitive impairment. Nelson exhibits explosive aggression and poor impulse control. Even Lisa, despite her intelligence, shows signs of anxiety and depression that could stem from chronic, low-level exposure. The adults dismiss all of this as individual personality flaws, rather than recognizing their entire community's children are being neurologically damaged by environmental toxins. This theory transforms Bart from a lovable troublemaker into a tragic victim of environmental neglect, whose family and community mistake neurological damage from lead poisoning for personality flaws they punish rather than address. Speaking of family tragedy, Lisa's genius might hide something darker. What if Lisa Simpson's intellectual superiority and emotional sensitivity aren't just personality traits, but early warning signs of severe mental illness that will fully manifest in adulthood? This theory suggests that Lisa's intense isolation, frequent depressive episodes, and age-inappropriate existential crises indicate developing psychological disorders that her dysfunctional family is completely unprepared to address. Throughout the series, Lisa displays patterns common in young people who later develop serious mental health conditions: profound loneliness, inability to connect with peers, emotional volatility, and obsessive focus on abstract problems while struggling with basic social integration. This theory developed in fan communities around 2010 to 2011 when viewers began analyzing Lisa's character through a mental health lens rather than simply viewing her as the smart Simpson. The theory gained support when fans documented her numerous breakdown episodes and noted that her behavior matches early onset indicators for conditions like bipolar disorder, clinical depression, and anxiety disorders. Mental health professionals participating in these discussions observed that Lisa exhibits warning signs often missed in gifted children, whose intelligence masks their deteriorating psychological state. In Moaning Lisa, we see 8-year-old Lisa experiencing a severe depressive episode that her family initially ignores and then addresses only superficially. She loses interest in activities she normally enjoys, experiences persistent sadness she cannot explain, and tells her mother she feels fundamentally different from other people in ways that cause her pain. Marge's advice, to smile even when unhappy and hide her true feelings, teaches Lisa to mask her symptoms rather than seek treatment. This response to childhood depression often leads to more serious manifestations in adolescence and adulthood. The episode reveals that Lisa's emotional struggles began early and that her family's dysfunction prevents them from providing appropriate mental health support. Most telling is Lisa's profound social isolation. She has no genuine friendships despite years at Springfield Elementary. Her intellectual interests separate her from peers, but the intensity of her isolation suggests something deeper than mere giftedness. She sits alone at lunch, plays alone at recess, and spends most of her time either practicing saxophone or engaging in solitary, intellectual pursuits. This extreme isolation during critical developmental years often precedes serious mental health crises in adolescence. Lisa isn't just smart and unpopular. She's fundamentally unable to connect with her peer group in ways that suggest emerging social emotional disorders. The theory gains strength when examining future episodes that show adult Lisa. These glimpses consistently depict her struggling with relationships, career instability, and continued social dysfunction. In Lisa's Wedding, she's engaged but clearly ambivalent about her relationship and life path. In Bart to the Future, she's president but surrounded by chaos and dysfunction. These aren't success stories. They're portraits of someone whose early mental health issues were never addressed, leading to a life of high achievement alongside persistent psychological struggle. Her intelligence allows her to function at high levels while remaining fundamentally unwell. Lisa's family history supports this interpretation. The Bouvier women, Marge, Patty, and Selma, all show signs of depression, anxiety, and relationship dysfunction. Patty and Selma chain smoke and openly discuss their unhappiness. Marge has her own documented struggles with stress, anxiety, and episodes that suggest undiagnosed mental health conditions. Lisa comes from a maternal line of women with clear psychological issues that were never properly treated. The genetic component of mental illness means Lisa faces high risk of developing the same conditions her mother and aunts struggle with. Most damning is how the family responds to Lisa's obvious distress. When she cries, they tell her to stop. When she expresses concerns, they dismiss them as overthinking. When she seeks emotional connection, they're too wrapped up in their own dysfunction to provide it. Homer actively mocks her intelligence and sensitivity. Bart treats her as an annoyance. Only Marge occasionally tries to help, but her own untreated issues prevent her from providing meaningful support. Lisa receives no therapy, no counseling, no mental health intervention of any kind. She's a child showing clear warning signs while surrounded by adults too dysfunctional to recognize or address them. The theory suggests that what Springfield sees as a gifted child is actually a young person struggling with inherited mental illness and environmental factors that compound her genetic predisposition. Her intelligence makes her more aware of her isolation and dysfunction, creating a feedback loop where consciousness of her problems intensifies the psychological damage. She's bright enough to recognize that something is wrong with her and her family, but too young and unsupported to address it, leading to deteriorating mental health that will define her entire life. But Lisa isn't the only Simpson child with a dark secret. Maggie's silence might be calculated. What if Maggie Simpson isn't an innocent baby, but a calculating manipulator who uses her silent baby persona to control family dynamics while avoiding all responsibility? This theory suggests that Maggie's refusal to speak or age beyond infancy represents a strategic choice that allows her to maintain power while escaping accountability. Throughout the series, Maggie demonstrates intelligence far beyond infant capacity, yet maintains her baby act to exploit the privileges and protections that come with appearing helpless. This theory emerged in Simpsons communities around 2005 to 2006, when fans began cataloging instances where Maggie displays sophisticated understanding while maintaining her nonverbal facade. The theory gained momentum when viewers connected her deliberate shooting of Mr. Burns to numerous other moments suggesting calculated awareness. Fans noted that Maggie succeeds where other family members fail, precisely because everyone underestimates her, assuming she's too young to understand when she's actually the most perceptive member of the household. The evidence becomes clear in Who Shot Mr. Burns Part 2, which reveals that Maggie, not an adult, deliberately shot Springfield's most powerful citizen. The episode initially presents this as an accident, a baby who found a gun and pulled the trigger without understanding consequences. But examine the sequence carefully. Maggie had to locate the gun, understand how to operate it, aim accurately, and fire at the exact moment to hit her target. These actions require motor skills, understanding of cause and effect, and intentionality that no actual infant possesses. The show dismisses this as cartoon logic. But what if it's evidence of Maggie's hidden capabilities? She shot Mr. Burns deliberately, knowing exactly what she was doing, then allowed adults to assume it was an accident because maintaining her baby persona protects her from consequences. Throughout the series, Maggie demonstrates abilities that contradict her supposed developmental stage. She's saved Homer's life multiple times, showing situational awareness and problem-solving capacity. She's rescued family members from danger by understanding complex situations and taking appropriate action. She's operated machinery, understood conversations, and responded to events in ways proving she comprehends everything happening around her. Yet she never speaks, never walks consistently, never stops using a pacifier. This selective development, full cognitive ability alongside frozen physical presentation, suggests deliberate choice rather than natural growth. Most revealing is how Maggie benefits from her baby status. She faces zero expectations or responsibilities. Every family member caters to her needs while she contributes nothing. She witnesses family secrets and dysfunction without anyone moderating their behavior around her, assuming she won't remember or understand. This gives her complete information about family dynamics while maintaining total freedom from accountability. She can observe, manipulate, and influence situations while protected by adults' assumptions that she's too young to be calculating. It's the perfect position of power. The theory explains why Maggie never ages. The Simpson children's frozen ages get explained away as cartoon logic. But Maggie's case is different. Bart and Lisa at least progress through school years and relationship developments. Maggie remains literally frozen. Same age, same pacifier, same appearance for over 30 years of episodes. This isn't oversight. It's Maggie choosing to maintain the developmental stage that grants her maximum benefit. The moment she walks and talks consistently, she'll face expectations, rules, and responsibilities. As long as she remains a baby, she maintains absolute freedom, while everyone else in the family suffers consequences for their actions. Future episodes provide additional evidence. When shows glimpse Maggie's future, she's articulate, capable, and successful. Lisa's wedding shows her as Marge's wedding coordinator, speaking fluently and handling complex tasks. These futures reveal that Maggie can speak and function at high levels. She simply chooses not to in the present because maintaining her baby persona serves her interests. The moment she gains something from speaking or aging, she'll do so. Until then, she plays her role perfectly. This interpretation transforms Maggie from helpless infant into the family's most sophisticated operator, weaponizing adults' assumptions about baby helplessness to maintain power, while avoiding the dysfunction and consequences that plague every other Simpson family member. If Maggie is secretly brilliant, perhaps Marge is hiding her own intelligence, or lack thereof. What if Marge Simpson's seemingly patient personality isn't consistency, but actually multiple distinct personalities taking turns dealing with her dysfunctional family? This theory suggests that Marge suffers from dissociative identity disorder, with different personalities emerging to handle different levels of family trauma. Throughout the series, Marge displays dramatic personality shifts that go beyond normal emotional range, suggesting distinct alters protecting her core identity from psychological damage that would otherwise break her completely. This theory emerged in online discussions around 2012 to 2013, when mental health professionals participating in fan forums began analyzing Marge's extreme behavioral variations through a clinical lens. The theory gained support when fans documented how Marge's personality doesn't just fluctuate, it fundamentally transforms based on situation and stress level, with different versions of Marge displaying completely different values, speech patterns, and behavioral norms. These aren't moods, they're distinct personalities that emerge when specific triggers activate them. In The Way We Was, we see young Marge as an intelligent, ambitious woman with dreams and standards. She's articulate, confident, and selective about romantic partners. This original Marge personality had plans for her life that didn't include settling for a crude nuclear plant worker. But examine how she responds when Homer pursues her aggressively, despite her initial rejection. Something shifts. A different Marge emerges, one who accepts treatment that the original Marge would never tolerate. This early split suggests the fragmentation began in adolescence when Marge needed to reconcile her self-image with her attraction to someone who contradicted everything she thought she wanted. The evidence becomes clear when cataloging Marge's distinct personality states throughout the series. There's patient Marge, who tolerates Homer's abuse with supernatural calm. There's Rage Marge, who erupts in violent fury when pushed beyond breaking points. There's Gambling Marge, who develops destructive addictions when seeking escape. There's Ambitious Marge, who briefly pursues careers or interests before another personality reasserts control. These aren't facets of one personality. They're separate identities that emerge in sequence, each handling situations the others cannot process. Most telling is how quickly and completely Marge shifts between these states. In Fear of Flying, Marge develops a sudden phobia requiring therapy, which reveals traumatic childhood memories she'd completely suppressed. The therapy shows Marge's mind protecting her through dissociation and amnesia, classic indicators of DID. She literally cannot remember traumatic events until a therapist helps her access the memories, suggesting her mind has partitioned experiences to protect her core identity. When the memories surface, a different Marge emerges, one who experienced trauma the normal Marge never acknowledged. The theory explains Marge's tolerance of Homer's abuse. No single personality could withstand decades of being married to Homer Simpson. He strangles their son regularly. He's repeatedly unfaithful or inappropriate. He's constantly selfish, destructive, and negligent. He's endangered their children countless times. Any reasonable person would leave. But Marge doesn't, because different personalities take turns dealing with Homer, preventing any single personality from accumulating enough trauma to trigger escape. Patient Marge handles his everyday selfishness. Rage. Marge releases anger when pressure builds too high. Depressed Marge dissociates during the worst periods. Each personality absorbs some damage, preventing the total system breakdown that leaving would represent. Marge's family background supports this interpretation. Her father, Clancy, was an abusive, angry presence. Her mother, Jacqueline, is cold and critical, constantly putting Marge down. Patty and Selma openly mock her life choices while depending on her for emotional support. Marge grew up in an environment where her needs were never met, where she faced criticism from all sides, where she learned early that survival required becoming whoever others needed her to be. This childhood created the foundation for personality fragmentation. The only way young Marge could cope was to develop different selves for different family members' demands. Most damning is how episodes that focus on Marge reveal different women depending on which personality is dominant. Some episodes show her as capable and intelligent. Others depict her as almost simple-minded. Some show her as sexually confident. Others present her as repressed and anxious. The show treats these as inconsistencies or different moods, but track them carefully. They're distinct personalities with different capabilities, values, and responses to identical situations. Marge isn't one woman acting differently. She's multiple personalities taking turns inhabiting the same body. The theory suggests Marge hasn't stayed with Homer through love, but through psychological fragmentation that allows different personalities to handle different levels of dysfunction. When one personality reaches its breaking point, another takes over, resetting the tolerance threshold. This explains how their marriage survives situations that should end it. The core Marge personality, the one who originally had dreams and standards, is buried deep, protected by a system of alters who handle the daily trauma of being Marge Simpson. Marge's trauma might be real, but what if the entire family's existence isn't? What if the Simpson family actually died years ago, and everything we see represents their souls trapped in purgatory, endlessly repeating the same dysfunctional patterns without hope of redemption or growth? This theory suggests that Springfield isn't a real place, but a supernatural holding area where the dead act out their worst traits forever, unable to change or escape. Throughout the series, characters display the primary characteristic of purgatorial existence. They experience consequences repeatedly without learning from them, trapped in cycles they cannot break. This theory started gaining traction in Simpsons forums around 2008 to 2009, particularly after later seasons made the show's reality increasingly surreal. Fans observed that the show's lack of character growth and aging wasn't just creative choice. It perfectly matched theological descriptions of purgatory as a state of suspended existence where souls cannot progress. The theory gained support when viewers noted that the Halloween episodes, officially non-canon, might actually reveal the show's true supernatural nature that regular episodes disguise as mundane sitcom reality. The evidence becomes clear when examining the show's relationship with death and time. Characters die in gruesome ways, then reappear in the next episode with no explanation. Maud Flanders actually dies and stays dead, but this exception proves the rule. Her permanent death required explicit narrative acknowledgement. Every other death gets undone or ignored. The family members themselves survive situations that should absolutely kill them, then continue as if nothing happened. This isn't cartoon resilience, it's supernatural immortality. They cannot die because they're already dead. In Treehouse of Horror episodes, we glimpse the supernatural reality beneath Springfield's surface. The Simpsons encounter actual demons, devils, and otherworldly entities who treat them as equals or inferiors, never as humans who shouldn't be interacting with supernatural forces. The devil knows Homer by name. Death is a regular presence. Supernatural beings casually involve themselves in Simpson family business. These episodes get dismissed as non-canon Halloween fantasies. But what if they're actually revealing the truth? The regular episodes are the fantasy, a mundane disguise covering purgatorial reality. The Halloween episodes let us see Springfield as it actually is, a supernatural prison. Most telling is Springfield's impossible geography. The town exists nowhere. It borders states that don't border each other. Its climate changes based on episode needs. It contains impossible businesses and locations that appear and disappear. Travel times make no sense. Sometimes Springfield is near the ocean, sometimes it's landlocked. No real place works this way. But purgatory isn't a real place. It's a spiritual construct that takes whatever form necessary to contain its trapped souls. Springfield's geography shifts because it's not bound by physical reality. It's a supernatural container that reconfigures itself to prevent escape. The theory explains the show's lack of consequences and growth. In purgatory, souls replay their sins and failings endlessly, unable to progress or learn. Homer commits the same selfish acts every episode. Marge enables him in identical patterns. Bart faces the same temptations and makes the same choices. They experience consequences. Homer gets fired, Bart faces detention, relationships fracture. But these consequences never lead to change. Each episode resets them to baseline, ready to repeat their patterns again. This isn't poor character development, it's purgatorial repetition. They're condemned to act out their worst traits forever, unable to grow or escape. Springfield's isolation supports this interpretation. Despite being a large town, Springfield feels contained and separate from the outside world. Guest stars arrive, but they exist in Springfield's reality rather than bringing external reality with them. When family members travel, they return unchanged. The outside world barely exists except as occasional backdrop. This containment mirrors theological descriptions of purgatory as separated from the living world, a discrete space where the dead exist apart from earthly reality. Most damning is how characters occasionally seem aware of their condition. They reference previous episodes and contradictions. They acknowledge their inability to change. They express existential despair about their trapped existence. These moments of awareness suggest imprisoned souls occasionally recognizing their purgatorial state before memory wipes, and they repeat their cycles again. They're conscious enough to glimpse the truth, but powerless to escape it. This interpretation transforms The Simpsons from a family sitcom into a meditation on eternal punishment, where souls are denied growth and change, forced to replay their worst traits forever in a simulacrum of family life that can never lead to redemption or peace. If you're enjoying this series so far, don't forget to subscribe. What if Homer Simpson's legendary stupidity isn't real, but a sophisticated performance that allows him to avoid adult responsibilities while maintaining sympathy from those around him? This theory suggests that Homer deliberately acts more stupid than he is, because incompetence grants him freedom from expectations, emotional labor, and consequences. Throughout the series, Homer displays strategic incompetence, failing at tasks he finds undesirable while succeeding at activities he actually wants to do, suggesting his stupidity is selective rather than genuine. This theory emerged in online communities around 2012 to 2013, when fans began comparing early season Homer to later season Homer and noticed the character didn't just get dumber, he got dumber in specifically convenient ways. The theory gained momentum when viewers cataloged moments where Homer demonstrates real intelligence when it serves his interests, then immediately reverts to stupidity when expectations arise. Psychologists in these discussions noted that Homer's pattern matches strategic incompetence, a manipulation tactic where people deliberately fail at tasks to avoid being assigned them in the future. The evidence becomes clear when comparing Homer across seasons. In early episodes, Homer worked as technical supervisor at the nuclear plant, successfully resolved complex family situations, and displayed functional intelligence. He was crude and impulsive, but capable. Then his stupidity intensified dramatically and specifically. He became unable to perform basic tasks, forgot his children's names, and required constant assistance with elementary activities. But this deterioration isn't consistent. Homer successfully executes elaborate schemes when pursuing his own interests. He navigates complex situations when motivated. His stupidity activates primarily when others need something from him. In Homer's Enemy, Frank Grimes arrives at the plant and immediately recognizes something others miss. Homer's incompetence doesn't match his position or outcomes. Grimes works himself to exhaustion following rules and trying to succeed through merit, while Homer faces no consequences despite constant failure. The episode frames Grimes as the crazy one for expecting fairness. But what if Grimes actually perceived the truth? Homer isn't incompetent, he's weaponizing incompetence. He's discovered that acting stupid grants him immunity from expectations while maintaining employment, marriage, and community standing. Grimes's breakdown comes from witnessing someone succeed through deliberate failure, violating everything he believes about meritocracy. Most revealing is Marge's response to Homer's stupidity. She constantly covers for him, completes tasks he can't do, and manages everything he claims is beyond his capability. She's enabled his strategic incompetence for decades, training him that acting helpless gets his work done for him. When Homer needs to care for the children, he suddenly can't remember basic parenting. When housework needs doing, he's mysteriously incapable. But when he wants to join a bowling league, plan elaborate schemes with Barney, or pursue personal interests, his competence suddenly returns. He can plan trips to Moe's but can't plan family activities. He can remember sports statistics but forgets anniversaries. This selective memory and capability betrays his act. The theory explains why Homer's behavior never improves despite consequences. He doesn't improve because improvement would mean increased responsibility. Every time Homer shows competence, family and work expectations rise, so he sabotages himself strategically, demonstrating just enough capability to keep his job and marriage while maintaining low expectations. When he succeeds at something, he'll fail spectacularly at the next task to reset expectations downward. This isn't character inconsistency, it's calculated incompetence management. Homer's job security also supports this interpretation. Despite his supposed stupidity and constant failures, he never gets permanently fired. Mr. Burns keeps him employed for decades. This makes no sense if Homer is genuinely stupid. But if Burns and Smithers recognize that Homer is smart enough to maintain his position while not smart enough to threaten them, his employment makes perfect sense. Homer has found exactly the level of competence that keeps him employed without requiring actual effort or advancement. It's a deliberate equilibrium. Most damning is how Homer responds when genuinely challenged intellectually. When Henry Kissinger calls him, Homer converses appropriately. When surgeons discuss complex medical procedures, Homer follows along. When situations require real problem solving without social performance, Homer's intelligence emerges. Then the moment returns to family context, stupidity reasserts itself. He's not stupid. He's performing stupidity for an audience he's trained to accept and enable it. The theory transforms Homer from a lovable idiot into a calculating manipulator who weaponizes incompetence to avoid emotional growth, family responsibility, and adult expectations. His stupidity isn't cognitive limitation, it's his most sophisticated manipulation tactic, perfected over decades of avoiding work while maintaining victim status. But if Homer is playing dumb, maybe someone else is playing a different role entirely. This next theory will surprise you. What if the reason Mr. Burns keeps Homer employed despite his incompetence isn't random, but because Homer is secretly Burns' illegitimate son from an affair with Mona Simpson? This theory suggests that Burns' strange protectiveness of Homer, his unexplained tolerance of Homer's failures, and his occasional knowledge of Homer's childhood all point toward a hidden paternal relationship that neither man acknowledges. Throughout the series, Burns displays a unique relationship with Homer that goes beyond typical employer-employee dynamics, suggesting deeper personal investment. This theory gained support around 2014 to 2015, when fans began analyzing the timeline of Mona Simpson's life as a fugitive and activist, realizing it overlapped with periods when she could have encountered Burns. The theory developed traction when viewers noted physical similarities between Homer and Burns. Both are bald with similar head shapes, both display specific personality traits, and both show patterns suggesting genetic connection. Medical and genealogical hobbyists and fan communities started mapping timelines, finding that Burns' age, Mona's activities, and Homer's birth year create a plausible window for an affair. The evidence becomes clear when examining Mother Simpson, which reveals that Mona went underground in the early 1970s after sabotaging Burns' biological weapons facility. But the episode also shows that Mona had been aware of Burns' activities long before the sabotage, suggesting prior contact. Young activist Mona, investigating nuclear and biological threats, would have encountered wealthy industrialist Burns during her research. The timeline works. Mona could have met Burns in the late 1960s while investigating his facilities, had a brief affair, given birth to Homer in 1956, and only later realized the full extent of Burns' evil. Her sabotage of his facility years later could have been partially motivated by rage at having borne his child. Most telling is how Burns treats Homer compared to other employees. Homer causes disasters, accumulates safety violations, sleeps on the job, and displays profound incompetence. Any normal employee would be fired immediately and possibly face criminal charges. Yet Burns keeps Homer employed year after year, occasionally even promoting him or assigning him important tasks. When Homer saves Burns' life, Burns is genuinely grateful in ways he never shows toward other employees. When Homer faces crises, Burns occasionally intervenes personally rather than delegating to Smithers. This pattern suggests personal investment beyond business utility. The theory explains Burns' specific knowledge of Homer's life. In multiple episodes, Burns demonstrates awareness of Homer's childhood, family history, and personal circumstances that he shouldn't possess about a low-level employee. He knows details about Homer's past that only someone with personal interest would track. He's aware of Simpson family dynamics in ways that suggest active monitoring. Most employers don't maintain detailed files on average workers' personal lives, but a father secretly tracking his illegitimate son would. Physical similarities support this interpretation. Look at their head shapes, their body builds, their ear structures. Homer and Burns share specific physical characteristics despite apparent age difference. Both are bald with distinctive head shapes. Both display similar facial features when Homer ages in future episodes. The physical resemblance isn't obvious because Burns is elderly and emaciated, but map their features carefully. They share genetic markers. If Burns is Homer's father, Homer's appearance represents what Burns looked like in middle age before extreme aging and wealth-induced lifestyle changes transformed his physique. Most damning is Smithers' behavior toward Homer. Smithers maintains Burns' schedule, manages his affairs, and knows all his secrets. If Burns is Homer's father, Smithers definitely knows. This explains Smithers' strange tolerance of Homer, his occasional unexplained interventions to protect Homer from consequences, and his management of the Homer situation behind Burns's back. Smithers isn't protecting an incompetent employee, he's protecting his employer's illegitimate son, knowing that Homer's continued presence at the plant satisfies Burns's need to maintain connection to his only offspring without acknowledging the relationship. This interpretation explains Springfield's strangest employer-employee relationship, while adding dark layers to both Burns's character and Homer's identity. Burns keeps his only biological child close, but refuses to acknowledge him, maintaining him in low-status employment to satisfy both paternal instinct and Burns's need for superiority. Homer works for his biological father without knowing it, unconsciously seeking approval he'll never receive. Speaking of identity, Smithers might be hiding more than just his competence. What if Wayland Smithers' seemingly loyal devotion to Mr. Burns actually conceals a decades-long poisoning campaign designed to inherit his employer's fortune? This theory suggests that Smithers has been slowly administering toxins to Burns for years, counting on his obsessive devotion to mask his murderous intentions. Throughout the series, Smithers maintains total control over Burns's food, medications, and daily routine, while Burns's health demonstrably deteriorates, creating perfect conditions for undetectable murder. This theory emerged in fan communities around 2015 to 2016, when viewers began noting the darkly codependent nature of the Burns-Smithers relationship and Burns's progressive physical decline throughout the series. The theory gained momentum when fans documented that Smithers is positioned as primary beneficiary of Burns's estate, despite their non-familial relationship, creating clear financial motive. True crime enthusiasts participating in these discussions noted that Smithers displays the classic profile of a long-term poisoner: close personal access, complete trust from the victim, control over all consumption, and motivation masked by apparent devotion. The evidence becomes clear when examining Smithers' control over Burns's daily life. Smithers prepares Burns's food, manages his medications, controls access to his person, and maintains his schedule. Burns consumes nothing Smithers doesn't provide or approve. This level of control gives Smithers unlimited opportunity to administer toxins in forms Burns would never detect. Small doses of poison in daily supplements, contaminated food, or tampered medications could gradually weaken Burns while mimicking natural aging, making the murder invisible to outside observation. In episodes focusing on Burns's health, we consistently see Smithers managing his medical care, accompanying him to doctors, and controlling what information reaches physicians. When Burns has medical episodes, Smithers is always present, always involved, always managing the situation. He's positioned himself as essential intermediary between Burns and medical professionals, allowing him to suppress evidence of poisoning, manipulate test results, and ensure no doctor recognizes the pattern of symptoms. Most tellingly, Burns's condition never improves significantly despite receiving treatment. He cycles through health crises without sustained recovery, suggesting ongoing toxic exposure rather than natural disease progression. The theory gains credibility when examining Burns's physical changes throughout the series. Early episodes show Burns as frail but functional. Later seasons depict him as increasingly decrepit, frequently hospitalized, and displaying symptoms consistent with chronic poisoning, weakness, confusion, organ dysfunction, and premature aging. Smithers explains this as natural aging, but Burns is 104 years old in early seasons. How much additional aging should occur in a cartoon timeline where characters don't age? The deterioration isn't natural aging. It's systematic poisoning gradually destroying Burns's organs. Most chilling is Smithers' financial motivation. The show references that Smithers stands to inherit Burns's fortune, giving him millions of reasons to want Burns dead. But Smithers can't simply kill Burns outright. Too obvious? Too traceable? Instead, he's playing the long game, gradually weakening Burns over years or decades, allowing the poisoning to appear as natural decline. Smithers needs Burns to die slowly enough that no one questions it, while maintaining his devoted assistant persona to avoid suspicion. His supposedly unrequited love provides perfect cover for murder. Who suspects a man so devoted of poisoning his obsession? Smithers' behavior during Burns's absences also supports this interpretation. When Burns leaves town, Smithers relaxes, his demeanor changes, and he pursues his own interests freely. He's not pining for Burns. He's relieved of his poisoning duties temporarily. When Burns returns, Smithers' tension returns. This isn't lovesick longing. It's the stress of maintaining a decades-long murder campaign while pretending devotion. Most damning is how Smithers responds when Burns's life is genuinely threatened by external forces. When other people try to kill Burns, Smithers protects him frantically. This initially seems like devotion, but consider the alternative. If someone else kills Burns, Smithers' inheritance could be jeopardized. He needs Burns to die from natural causes he's orchestrated, not obvious murder that would trigger investigations. Smithers protects Burns from others not from love, but to preserve his own murder plan. The theory suggests every act of devotion hides another dose, with Smithers playing the long game for both fortune and revenge against decades of casual cruelty from an employer who treats him as property while dangling inheritance as eternal manipulation. If Smithers is capable of such calculation, perhaps Ned Flanders' goodness is equally calculated. What if Ned Flanders' impossibly wholesome personality isn't genuine faith, but a carefully constructed identity created by federal witness protection after testifying against organized crime? This theory suggests that everything about Ned, his perfect family, his inexplicable wealth, his too-good-to-be-true persona, is witness protection cover story designed to hide his criminal past. Throughout the series, Ned displays specific contradictions that don't match his supposed history: unexplained income, mysterious past, no extended family, and occasional slips suggesting hidden expertise in violence and criminality. This theory developed around 2009 to 2010 when fans began questioning the Leftorium's impossible financial success and Ned's vague backstory. The theory gained support when viewers cataloged moments where Ned displays knowledge or skills that contradict his wholesome image: combat ability, criminal connections, understanding of illegal activities, suggesting a past he's deliberately concealing. Federal agents and legal professionals participating in fan discussions noted that Ned's situation matches classic witness protection placement: isolated location, fabricated backstory, unexplained wealth, and no verifiable past. The evidence becomes clear when examining Ned's finances. The Leftorium, a store specializing in products for left-handed people, should not generate enough revenue to support his lifestyle. The market is too small, the products too niche. Yet Ned owns a large house, supports a family, and faces no financial stress despite operating a business model that makes no economic sense. When the store fails in one episode, he recovers instantly without explanation. This wealth doesn't come from retail. It comes from federal payments to maintain his cover story and keep him cooperative. In Viva Ned Flanders, we learn Ned has almost no verifiable past before arriving in Springfield. His wild Vegas weekend reveals that wholesome Ned is an act. Beneath it lies someone capable of spontaneous behavior, risk-taking, and confidence that contradict his timid persona. The episode shows Ned married a cocktail waitress in a moment of freedom from his constructed identity. This glimpse of real Ned, impulsive, adventurous, willing to break rules, contradicts everything Springfield knows about him. What if Vegas Ned is actual Ned, and Springfield Ned is the witness protection construct? Most revealing is Ned's relationship with organized crime figures who occasionally appear in Springfield. When mobsters visit, Ned displays unusual comfort and sometimes specific knowledge that shouldn't exist in a man whose entire life supposedly centers on church and neighborhood. He navigates encounters with criminals using street smarts rather than naivete. These moments reveal someone with experience in criminal contexts who's learned to mask that knowledge beneath wholesome performance. The theory explains Ned's lack of extended family. Witness protection requires cutting all ties with previous life to prevent discovery. Ned has no parents who visit, no siblings, no extended family network. This total isolation is unusual and suspicious. Most people maintain some family connections. Ned has none, suggesting either all his family is dead or he was forced to abandon them when entering protection. His devotion to creating perfect family with Maud and the boys isn't just faith. It's compensating for the family and identity he lost when he testified. Ned's overcompensating religiosity also supports this interpretation. Excessive devotion to public morality often masks guilt from past immorality. Ned doesn't just believe. He performs belief constantly and publicly, ensuring everyone knows his wholesome identity. This need to advertise goodness suggests someone trying to convince others and himself that he's transformed from whoever he was before. His religion isn't just faith, it's identity reconstruction, using Christian identity to bury his criminal past. Most damning is Ned's response to stress. When pushed to breaking points, different Ned emerges: angry, violent, capable of frightening rage. Hurricane Neddy reveals that Ned suppresses intense rage beneath his friendly surface, rage that therapy helped him contain but never eliminated. This suggests someone with capacity for violence who's learned to channel it into socially acceptable forms. What if young Ned's violence wasn't just anger issues, but criminal violence that eventually required him to turn informant and enter protection? This interpretation transforms Springfield's most devout resident into a former criminal hiding behind scripture and sweater vests, maintaining his witness protection identity through excessive performance of wholesomeness that occasionally cracks to reveal the violent criminal beneath. But Ned's not the only Springfield resident with a hidden past. What if Mo Syslak's depression and isolation stem not from loneliness, but from guilt over his past as a professional assassin for organized crime? This theory suggests that Mo's constant suicidal ideation, his violent capabilities, and his mysterious backstory all point toward a former life as a hitman whose accumulated guilt now destroys him. Throughout the series, Mo demonstrates combat skills, weapons expertise, and psychological damage inconsistent with someone whose entire life was bartending, suggesting a violent career he's desperate to escape. This theory gained momentum around 2011 to 2012 when fans began cataloging Mo's combat abilities and connecting them to his chronic depression and isolation. The theory developed support when viewers noted that Mo's bar, perpetually failing, barely profitable, doesn't make sense as his actual career, but makes perfect sense as a cover operation or retirement activity for someone who made real money through violence. Mental health professionals in these discussions observed that Mo displays classic symptoms of PTSD and moral injury common in people who've killed repeatedly: hypervigilance, inappropriate anger, inability to form relationships, and persistent guilt. The evidence becomes clear when examining Mo's capabilities. He's an expert boxer with professional training. He displays hand-to-hand combat skills that go beyond bar fighting. He owns extensive weapon collections and demonstrates expert marksmanship. He can handle firearms with professional proficiency. He navigates encounters with organized crime figures as an equal, not a civilian. These aren't skills a bartender acquires casually. They're professional training that suggests military or criminal violence as former career. In episodes revealing Mo's past, we glimpse fragments suggesting criminal connections. He's attended criminal meetings. He has relationships with mob figures. He references past activities that sound like criminal operations rather than bartending mishaps. The show plays these for laughs, but connect them seriously. Mo has a criminal past he doesn't discuss. When organized crime appears in Springfield, Mo knows how to interact with them, suggesting shared background. He's not afraid of mobsters the way civilians are. He treats them as colleagues. Most telling is Mo's suicidal depression. He attempts suicide regularly, expresses desire to die constantly, and shows no joy in his existence. This isn't loneliness depression, it's moral injury depression. Mo demonstrates guilt-driven self-loathing consistent with someone who's killed people and cannot forgive himself. His bar isn't a business, it's penance. He surrounds himself with people to avoid being alone with his memories, serves drinks to numb himself and others, and maintains an operation that barely sustains him because he doesn't believe he deserves success or happiness. The theory explains Mo's inability to form romantic relationships. Women occasionally show interest in Mo, but he sabotages every possibility. This pattern suggests someone who believes he doesn't deserve love due to past evil. His self-sabotage isn't just low self-esteem, it's moral conviction that he's unworthy of normal happiness because of what he's done. He cannot allow himself connection or joy because some part of him knows he should be punished for his past. Mo's relationship with Homer also supports this interpretation. Homer is Mo's closest friend, despite being someone Mo regularly threatens and insults. Why maintain friendship with someone he claims to despise? Because Homer's presence keeps Mo connected to humanity. Without Homer and the other regulars, Mo would be completely isolated with his guilt. The bar full of people prevents him from confronting what he's done. Homer's friendship, shallow, transactional, is all Moe believes he deserves. Most damning is how Moe responds in moments of crisis. When violence threatens, Moe becomes coldly efficient, dispatching threats with professional precision that reveals training. These moments aren't comedy, they're glimpses of who Moe was. The violent capabilities he demonstrates represent skills from his former life as killer. He's not just a bartender who happens to be tough. He's a former assassin working behind a bar because he can't do anything else and drinking himself toward death because he can't escape what he's done. The theory suggests Moe's bar isn't a failed business, but penance, a place where he must face humanity daily while haunted by those he killed, serving drinks to people he doesn't deserve to know, waiting for death to finally punish him for crimes he's never been prosecuted for. If Moe is running from his past, Chief Wiggum might be running toward his corruption. Don't forget to subscribe if you're enjoying this series. What if Chief Wiggum's legendary incompetence isn't real stupidity, but calculated corruption, a deliberate performance that allows Springfield's criminal enterprises to flourish while he collects payoffs? This theory suggests that Wiggum's bumbling police work is intentional cover for his role as organized crime's protection within law enforcement. Throughout the series, Wiggum demonstrates selective competence that reveals his failures aren't random but strategic, protecting specific criminals while maintaining the appearance of incompetent chief rather than corrupt official. This theory emerged around 2011 to 2012 when fans began analyzing which crimes Springfield police solve versus which they ignore, discovering patterns suggesting deliberate selectivity rather than random incompetence. The theory gained traction when viewers noted that Fat Tony and organized crime operate openly in Springfield without police interference, suggesting protection arrangement rather than mere incompetence. Law enforcement professionals participating in these discussions observed that Wiggum displays markers of corrupt police chiefs, unexplained wealth, deliberate case mishandling, and selective enforcement that protects specific criminal elements. The evidence becomes clear when examining which crimes get investigated. Springfield police aggressively pursue minor infractions and nuisance crimes while ignoring major criminal operations. Fat Tony runs obvious criminal enterprises, gambling, loan sharking, likely murder for hire, yet faces no significant police pressure. His operations continue year after year, while Wiggum claims inability to build cases. This isn't incompetence, it's protection. Wiggum ensures organized crime operates freely by deliberately failing to investigate, destroying evidence, and bungling cases that do arise. In episodes featuring Fat Tony, we see Wiggum interact with mob figures with unusual comfort. He shows no fear of organized crime figures who could easily have him killed. He doesn't display the nervousness or tension an honest cop would feel around powerful criminals. Instead, he's casual, almost friendly, suggesting established relationship based on mutual benefit. Fat Tony treats Wiggum with casual contempt but not concern, knowing Wiggum is bought and poses no threat. This relationship is business arrangement, not cat-and-mouse law enforcement dynamic. Most revealing is Wiggum's lifestyle. His house is nice, his family lives comfortably, he has no obvious financial stress despite his public salary. Where does this money come from? Police chiefs in small American towns don't earn enough to support the lifestyle Wiggum maintains. His comfort suggests income beyond his official salary. Mob payoffs would explain his financial situation perfectly. Regular payments for keeping investigations superficial, ensuring cases collapse, and providing warning when state or federal attention threatens. The theory explains Wiggum's strategic incompetence patterns. He's capable when motivated, but fails strategically when failure benefits him. Cases against connected criminals collapse from evidence mishandling. Warrants contain errors, making them invalid. Investigations lose momentum for no apparent reason. These aren't mistakes, they're deliberate sabotage. Wiggum ensures organized crime operates freely while maintaining his bumbling persona to avoid suspicion of corruption. Springfield's crime patterns support this interpretation. Organized crime flourishes while petty crime faces aggressive prosecution. This inverse relationship is common in corrupt jurisdictions. Police appear busy by arresting minor offenders while protecting serious criminals who pay them. Wiggum can point to his department's arrest rate while ignoring that he's arresting the wrong people and protecting the actual criminal power structure. Most damning is how episodes treat Wiggum's failures. When cases collapse, There's never investigation into his conduct. When evidence disappears, no one questions him. When criminals escape custody, he faces no consequences. This pattern suggests institutional protection or acceptance of corruption. Either Springfield's government knows and accepts Wiggum's corruption, or he's so good at playing incompetent that no one suspects his failures are intentional. This interpretation transforms Springfield's buffoonish police chief into its most successfully corrupt official, hiding behind donuts and incompetence while organized crime thrives under his protection. His stupidity isn't cognitive limitation, it's the perfect cover for systematic corruption that's made him rich while making Springfield dangerous. If Wiggum is corrupt, perhaps Krusty the Clown's dysfunction masks something darker. What if Krusty the Clown's extreme personality differences between on-camera and private life aren't just professional masks, but distinct personalities created by severe childhood trauma from his father's rejection? This theory suggests that Krusty suffers from dissociative identity disorder, with Krusty as a separate personality that emerged to cope with Rabbi Krustovsky's emotional abuse. Throughout the series, Krusty displays the classic markers of DID, distinct personality states with different values and behaviors, amnesia about his own actions, and switching, triggered by specific stress or social contexts. This theory emerged in online discussions around 2014 to 2015, when mental health professionals participating in fan forums began analyzing Krusty's behavior through clinical psychology frameworks. The theory gained support when fans cataloged the extreme differences between Krusty's personas, not just public versus private, but multiple distinct identities with different speech patterns, values, and capabilities. Viewers noted that Krusty doesn't just act differently, he becomes fundamentally different people depending on context, suggesting dissociation rather than mere performance. In Like Father, Like Clown, we see the core trauma that potentially created Krusty's fragmentation. Young Herschel Krustovsky wanted his rabbi father's approval, but could only gain attention through comedy. When Rabbi Krustovsky rejected his son's comedy career, declaring it shameful to their Jewish heritage, he essentially rejected Herschel's core identity. This trauma, a child whose authentic self is deemed unacceptable by his primary attachment figure, creates perfect conditions for personality fragmentation. Unable to reconcile being himself while needing his father's love, Herschel's mind may have split into separate identities. Herschel, who wants his father's approval, and Krusty, who exists independently of that need. The evidence becomes clear when examining how completely Krusty and Herschel differ. It's not just costume and makeup. Krusty the performer is manic, inappropriate, self-destructive, and emotionally volatile. Herschel the person is depressive, reflective, occasionally showing depth and vulnerability. These aren't moods, they're different people. Krusty makes commitments Herschel doesn't remember. Herschel experiences consequences for Krusty's actions without feeling responsible for them. The switching between them isn't conscious performance. It's dissociative transition between alters. Most telling is Krusty's inability to maintain consistent relationships or identity across contexts. He's married and divorced multiple times with no continuity in how he relates to partners. He has a daughter he barely acknowledges, suggesting different personalities handle different relationship types inconsistently. His business dealings show no coherent pattern because different personalities make different decisions without coordination. This isn't character inconsistency. It's documentary of someone with DID trying to function across multiple life domains while different alters take control unpredictably. The theory explains Krusty's self-destructive behavior. His gambling addiction, substance abuse, and financial recklessness aren't just poor choices. They're alter-specific behaviors that emerge when particular personalities take control. Self-destructive Krusty makes decisions that responsible Herschel then must face consequences for, but since they're separate personalities, there's no learning or behavior change. Each personality pursues its own agenda without coordination, creating chaos in Krusty's external life. Krusty's relationship with his show also supports this interpretation. Krusty, the personality, only exists in performance context. When the cameras are off, different personality emerges. The show isn't where he performs. It's where Krusty personality gets to exist fully. This explains his desperate commitment to the show despite hating many aspects of it. The show is the only space where Krusty identity is valid and allowed. while Herschel's identity exists everywhere else, carrying Krusty's consequences. Most damning is how Krusty responds to identity questions. Multiple episodes show him unsure who he really is, unable to reconcile his different selves, experiencing profound identity confusion. He asks existential questions about authenticity that go beyond normal celebrity private versus public concerns. He genuinely doesn't know which version of himself is real because they're all real. They're separate personalities sharing one body, none of them fully understanding the others. The theory suggests Krusty's comedy isn't performance. It's a separate personality that emerged to survive his father's rejection, with Krusty and Herschel existing as distinct identities that occasionally become aware of each other but cannot fully integrate, leaving him fractured and unable to maintain coherent life despite professional success. Speaking of performers hiding trauma, Sideshow Bob's intellect might mask something darker. What if Sideshow Bob isn't a criminal mastermind, but a mentally ill individual whose obsession with Bart Simpson represents undiagnosed psychosis that Springfield's legal system refuses to acknowledge or treat? This theory suggests that Bob's repeated attempts to kill Bart stem from delusional disorder that makes him genuinely incapable of understanding reality or controlling his compulsive behavior. Throughout the series, Bob displays clear signs of severe mental illness, fixed false beliefs, inability to learn from consequences, compulsive repetition of self-destructive behavior, and complete loss of connection between his actions and reality. This theory emerged in online discussions around 2013 to 2014, when mental health advocates and fan communities began analyzing Bob's character through forensic psychology frameworks. The theory gained support when viewers noted that Bob's behavior matches diagnostic criteria for multiple serious mental illnesses, including obsessive-compulsive disorder, delusional disorder, and potentially schizophrenia. Legal professionals participating in these discussions observed that Bob would likely be found not guilty by reason of insanity if evaluated properly, as his obsession shows clear psychotic features rather than rational malice. The evidence becomes clear when examining Bob's obsession with Bart. It's not normal revenge. It's monomaniacal fixation that dominates his entire existence and destroys every opportunity he receives. When released from prison, Bob could pursue education, career, relationships, any normal life goals. Instead, he immediately resumes trying to kill a child, sacrificing everything for his compulsion. This isn't choice, it's compulsion. He cannot stop himself from returning to his delusion, despite knowing intellectually that it will result in his re-imprisonment. In Cape Fear, we see the full extent of Bob's psychosis. He follows the family to witness protection, dedicates enormous resources to finding them, and maintains his obsession despite having every reason to move on. His obsession has cost him his career, freedom, and dignity. Any rational person would recognize the costs outweigh the benefits and move on. Bob cannot. He's trapped in delusional belief that killing Bart will solve all his problems, despite this belief having no basis in reality. This is psychosis, fixed false belief resistant to evidence or reason. Most telling is how Bob processes his failures. Each time he's caught and imprisoned, he should learn that his plans don't work. Instead, he emerges from prison more committed to the same delusion, planning even more elaborate schemes with no awareness that he's repeating self-destructive pattern. This inability to learn from experience indicates serious cognitive impairment. His intelligence doesn't negate his insanity. High intelligence with poor reality testing is common in psychotic disorders. He can plan elaborate schemes, but cannot recognize that his fundamental premise is delusional. The theory explains why Bob's elaborate plans always include unnecessary complexity and theatrical elements. He doesn't just want Bart dead, he wants Bart to know he's going to die, wants to make speeches, wants to perform his revenge. This theatrical quality isn't rational criminal behavior. It's psychotic fantasy playing out. He's acting out scenarios from his delusional system rather than pursuing pragmatic murder. A sane murderer would simply shoot Bart from distance. Bob cannot because his psychosis requires elaborate ritual that exists only in his diseased mind. Springfield's legal system's handling of Bob reveals systemic failure. They repeatedly imprison him in general population rather than psychiatric facilities. They treat his obsession as criminal choice rather than psychiatric symptom. No one prescribes medication, provides therapy, or addresses his obvious mental illness. Each time he's released, Predictably, he immediately attempts the same crime, and they act surprised, rather than recognizing this pattern indicates psychiatric disorder requiring treatment, not just punishment. Most damning is how Bob himself experiences his obsession. He sometimes expresses awareness that his fixation is destroying him, that he should stop, that he's trapped in self-destructive pattern. These moments of insight reveal someone partially aware of his illness, but unable to control it. Psychotic individuals often have periods of partial clarity where they recognize their beliefs are irrational but cannot escape them. Bob's occasional self-awareness makes his condition more tragic. He knows he's sick, but receives no treatment. This interpretation transforms Sideshow Bob from evil genius into tragic victim of a mental health system that imprisons the ill instead of treating them, allowing him to cycle through prisons while his psychosis remains unaddressed and his life remains destroyed by compulsions he cannot control. But if Bob is insane, perhaps Springfield itself is the real illness. What if every character's strange appearance, bizarre behavior, and biological impossibility stems from severe radiation poisoning caused by decades of nuclear plant contamination? This theory suggests that Springfield's yellow-skinned population isn't cartoon stylization, but realistic portrayal of jaundice from radiation-induced organ failure. Throughout the series, characters display symptoms consistent with chronic radiation exposure: mutations, cognitive decline, cancer patterns, and reproductive abnormalities that mark Springfield as an environmental disaster zone where the poisoned population is too damaged to recognize their own condition. This theory gained support around 2007 to 2008 when fans began connecting Springfield's numerous mutations to real-world radiation exposure symptoms. The theory developed when viewers noted that the show's cartoon logic regarding character appearance and survival actually matches symptoms of population-wide radiation sickness. Environmental scientists and nuclear safety experts participating in these discussions observed that Springfield's documented environmental conditions would realistically cause exactly the symptoms characters display, suggesting the show accidentally created an accurate portrait of radiation disaster. The evidence becomes clear with Blinky, the three-eyed fish. This isn't one-off mutation. It's documented proof that Springfield's water supply contains sufficient radiation to cause genetic mutations. Blinky appears repeatedly, indicating sustained high-level contamination, not isolated incident. The show treats three-eyed fish as joke, but in reality, such mutations indicate catastrophic environmental poisoning. The fact that Springfield's water produces mutant fish proves radiation levels are high enough to alter DNA, meaning everyone drinking that water, the entire population, faces similar genetic damage. In episodes focusing on the nuclear plant, we see consistent evidence of safety violations and radiation leaks. Homer works in direct contact with radioactive materials without proper protection. The plant regularly releases contaminated steam and waste. Multiple episodes reference nuclear accidents, leaks, and containment failures. These aren't isolated incidents, they're chronic conditions. Springfield's population has been exposed to cumulative radiation for decades, resulting in tissue damage, organ failure, and neurological decline. Most telling is the population's yellow skin. The show frames this as animation style, but examine it practically. Jaundice causes yellow skin when liver fails to process bilirubin due to damage. Radiation exposure causes liver damage. Every Springfield resident having yellow skin indicates population-wide liver dysfunction from sustained toxic exposure. They're not yellow because they're cartoon characters. They're yellow because their livers are failing from radiation poisoning, and their brains are too damaged to recognize their condition. The theory explains Springfield's cognitive decline. Characters make increasingly irrational decisions, display memory problems, and show declining executive function. This matches radiation's effects on brain tissue. The population's collective stupidity isn't character trait, it's radiation-induced brain damage. Homer's deteriorating intelligence, Chief Wiggum's incompetence, and the general population's poor judgment all stem from neurons dying as radiation destroys their brain tissue. They're getting dumber because they're being poisoned to death. Cancer rates in Springfield support this interpretation. Multiple characters have or survive cancer that should be fatal. Burns has survived multiple forms of cancer simultaneously, impossible in reality, but explicable if Springfield's entire population has compromised immune systems from radiation exposure that simultaneously creates and prevents cancer through competing cellular damage. The fact that characters survive should-be fatal cancers suggests their cells are already so damaged that normal cancer progression doesn't work the same way. Most damning is how Springfield residents respond to evidence of contamination. When confronted with proof their environment is poisonous, they're unconcerned or actively deny it. This cognitive impairment, inability to recognize obvious danger, indicates neurological damage affecting judgment and self-preservation instincts. Healthy populations evacuate contaminated areas. Springfield residents stay because radiation has damaged the brain regions responsible for threat assessment and rational decision-making. The theory suggests The Simpsons isn't comedy but horror, a documentation of a poisoned population too contaminated to realize they're dying, maintained by a corporate power structure that profits from keeping them ignorant while radiation slowly destroys them. Springfield is Chernobyl with jokes, a town where everyone is dying, but brain damage prevents them from understanding their condition. If the environment is poisoned, perhaps the town's founder poisoned it deliberately. What if Jebediah Springfield never existed, and the town's entire founding mythology was invented to cover up Springfield's actual origins as a criminal refuge or slave trading post? This theory suggests that every monument, every historical document, and every founding story about Jebediah is fabricated propaganda designed to give Springfield a noble history while concealing shameful truth about its real founding. Throughout the series, evidence emerges suggesting Springfield's official history is systematically falsified, with town's leadership actively suppressing truth to maintain the profitable lie. This theory emerged immediately after Lisa the Iconoclast aired in 1996, when Lisa discovers Jebediah Springfield was actually murderous pirate Hans Sprungfeld, who never performed heroic acts attributed to him. Fans noted that Lisa's choice to bury this truth doesn't erase it. It confirms that Springfield's entire identity is based on lies. The theory gained momentum when viewers began cataloging other historical inconsistencies suggesting the town's entire past is fabricated, with each generation of leaders maintaining the profitable myths. The evidence becomes clear when examining Lisa's research in Lisa the Iconoclast. She finds documentary proof that Jebediah was Hans Sprungfeld, a vicious pirate who tried to kill George Washington. The silver tongue piercing her research reveals physically proves he was lying criminal, not noble founder. Yet when she presents this evidence, the town, including the Historical Society, rejects it. They don't even evaluate her evidence seriously. They choose myth over truth because Springfield's economy and identity depend on the false history. This willing blindness to documented fact reveals systematic historical falsification. Most telling is how Springfield's founding story changes between retellings. Different episodes present contradictory founding narratives, impossible timelines, and mutually exclusive historical claims. In real towns with genuine history, founding stories are consistent because they're based on actual events. Springfield's constantly shifting history reveals its pure invention, with storytellers making up details as needed without concern for consistency, because there's no true history to contradict. The Jebediah Monument and other historical sites don't prove Springfield's history. They prove someone invested heavily in creating the appearance of history. Monuments can be built to commemorate lies just as easily as truth. Springfield's elaborate historical infrastructure, monuments, museums, archives, represents generations of investment in maintaining fabricated identity. The more elaborate the historical preservation, the more likely they're preserving lies rather than truth. The theory explains why Springfield's location and history are so vague. The show deliberately avoids specifying which state contains Springfield or providing consistent geography because Springfield has no real history or location. It's a criminal refuge that could be anywhere, whose founders deliberately obscured its origins. Towns with genuine historical records can prove their location, founding date, and historical events. Springfield cannot, because those records are either fabricated or suppressed. Town leadership's response to Lisa's discovery reveals the cover-up's scope. They don't just reject her evidence, they threaten her, dismiss her findings without examination, and make clear that challenging official history has consequences. This isn't honest disagreement, it's enforced mythology. The Historical Society exists not to preserve truth, but to maintain lies. They know the real history and actively suppress it, suggesting they benefit from the false narrative. Most damning is who benefits from Springfield's false history. The founding families, the Quimbys, Van Houtens, and other old money lineages, derive legitimacy and power from descent from supposed noble founders. If Springfield was really founded by criminals, these families descend from outlaws and opportunists, not heroes. They maintain the lies because truth would destroy their social position. Springfield's elite are profiting from falsified history while preventing citizens from knowing their town's shameful real origins. This interpretation suggests every Springfield resident lives in a town built on lies, their entire civic identity manufactured propaganda concealing truth that would destroy their understanding of their community and its supposed values. Speaking of manufactured identities, the comic book guy might not be what he seems. What if comic book guy's condescending attitude and impossible business survival aren't delusion, but completely justified by a massive trust fund that makes his comic shop a hobby, not a livelihood? This theory suggests that comic book guy isn't a delusional nerd playing at retail. He's a wealthy beneficiary who operates his store as passion project while his inherited fortune supports him completely. Throughout the series, comic book guy displays financial security inconsistent with his apparently failing business, suggesting his dismissive attitude toward customers stems from genuine financial independence that makes their purchases irrelevant to his survival. This theory developed around 2014 to 2015, when fans began analyzing the economic impossibility of the android's dungeon surviving with minimal customers and comic book guy's apparent lifestyle. The theory gained support when viewers noted that comic book guy never displays financial stress, lives comfortably, owns expensive collections, and treats his business with casual indifference, suggesting it's not his actual income source. Business analysts participating in these discussions calculated that the comic shop couldn't generate sufficient revenue to support his lifestyle, indicating outside wealth. The evidence becomes clear when examining the android's dungeon's operations. The store is almost always empty. Episodes rarely show more than 1 or 2 customers. Comic book guy is openly hostile to potential buyers, driving away business through condescension. Any normal business with this customer traffic and owner attitude would fail immediately. Yet the store operates for decades without evident financial crisis. This survival despite no customers proves the store isn't real business. It's hobby operation funded by external money source. Most revealing is comic book guy's lifestyle. He lives in a reasonable apartment or house. He eats regularly at expensive restaurants. He owns extensive collections of rare comics, toys, and memorabilia worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. He attends conventions, buys limited editions, and maintains collections that would cost more than his store could possibly generate. This collecting requires serious wealth. Trust fund income would explain perfectly how he affords this lifestyle while barely selling anything. The theory explains comic book guy's attitude. His condescension isn't delusional superiority, it's actual superiority from someone who doesn't need customers, but allows them in his space anyway. He can insult customers because their purchases are irrelevant to his finances. He can close whenever he wants, maintain hostile environment, and generally treat retail as optional because for him, it is optional. He's not a struggling small business owner. He's a rich hobbyist who happens to own a store. His knowledge and collection support this interpretation. The depth and breadth of his comic knowledge, his ability to acquire rare items, and his extensive personal collection indicates someone who spent massive amounts of money pursuing his interest for years. Working retail doesn't generate that kind of disposable income. Inherited wealth does. Comic book guy has been able to dedicate his entire life to his niche interest because family money freed him from needing gainful employment. Most damning is how he responds when the store faces problems. When fires or disasters damage his inventory, he recovers instantly without evident insurance battles or financial struggles. When rent should be due or expenses mount, he shows no concern. Normal small business owners live on the edge of failure, stress about every expense, and work constantly to generate revenue. Comic book guy does none of this because his store is basically an elaborate private collection with a cash register that occasionally rings. This interpretation transforms comic book guy from delusional nerd into trust fund beneficiary, slumming it in retail, because he genuinely loves comics and enjoys having a space to display his collection while condescending to people who can't afford what he owns. But what if loving something too much is exactly what's wrong with groundskeeper Willie? What if groundskeeper Willie's explosive rage and isolation aren't Scottish stereotypes, but symptoms of severe PTSD from military service that Springfield neither recognizes nor treats? This theory suggests that Willie's violent outbursts, survival skills, and inability to integrate into society indicate combat trauma that manifests as aggression because he received no post-service mental health care. Throughout the series, Willie displays classic PTSD symptoms: hypervigilance, explosive anger, nightmares, social isolation, and combat flashbacks that Springfield mistakes for personality, rather than recognizing as untreated war trauma. This theory emerged in discussions around 2016 to 2017 when military veterans participating in fan communities began noting Willie's behavior matches their own PTSD symptoms and those of fellow veterans they'd served with. The theory gained support when viewers cataloged Willie's combat capabilities, survival expertise, and trauma responses that suggest someone trained for violence who never received reintegration support. Mental health professionals specializing in veteran care noted that Willie displays textbook post-combat trauma that civilian communities often fail to recognize or address. The evidence becomes clear when examining Willie's capabilities. He displays expert combat skills despite working as a janitor. He demonstrates survival expertise that goes beyond general outdoorsman knowledge. It's military-level training in hostile environment survival. In Skinner's Sense of Snow, Willie survives being trapped in his shed during a blizzard using techniques that match military cold weather training. He doesn't just endure, he thrives in conditions that would kill civilians, suggesting someone trained for survival in hostile environments. Most telling is Willie's rage. It's not normal anger, it's explosive, disproportionate, and triggered unpredictably. He goes from calm to violent instantly, suggesting hyperarousal and poor emotional regulation common in PTSD. His threats are graphic and specific, indicating someone who's imagined or enacted violence extensively. Civilians don't spontaneously develop detailed violent fantasies. Combat veterans sometimes do, especially those with untreated trauma who remain stuck in combat mindset despite being in civilian environment. The theory explains Willie's isolation. He lives alone in a shack on school grounds, separated from community despite working in its center. He has no apparent friends, no social connections, no integration into Springfield's social fabric. This isolation matches what happens to combat veterans who cannot reintegrate after service. They're physically present, but psychologically separated, unable to relate to civilians who haven't experienced what they've experienced. Willie's shack isn't just housing, it's his fortification, his separation from a civilian world he no longer fits into. Willie's relationship with authority also supports this interpretation. He's simultaneously hostile to and trapped in hierarchical system. He resents Skinner, but follows orders. He complains about his treatment, but doesn't leave. This mirrors military experience, trained to obey hierarchy while resenting it, unable to fully transition to civilian autonomy. Willie treats Skinner like a commanding officer he despises but can't disobey, suggesting military obedience patterns he never unlearned. Most damning is Springfield's response to Willie. They see him as joke character, angry janitor with funny accent. No one asks about his past, checks on his welfare, or recognizes his symptoms as trauma requiring treatment. He lives in a shack without adequate facilities, works a low-status job despite evident capabilities, and displays obvious psychological distress. Any social services system should intervene. None do, because Springfield, like many American communities, ignores veterans once they're no longer useful for military service. The theory suggests Willie isn't a janitor with anger issues, but an abandoned veteran whose trauma manifests as rage, while society that used him for military service now ignores his suffering and leaves him to survive alone with untreated combat PTSD. If you're enjoying this series, don't forget to like and subscribe. What if the episode revealing Principal Skinner as Armin Tamzarian wasn't real history, but a documented psychotic break where Skinner invented an elaborate alternate identity to escape his failures? This theory suggests that the principal and the pauper doesn't reveal Skinner's secret. It documents his public psychological collapse that Springfield collectively decided to forget rather than address. Throughout the episode and subsequent series, evidence suggests the Tamzarian story was Skinner's delusion during a mental health crisis, not suppressed truth about his identity. This theory emerged immediately after The Principal and the Pauper aired in 1997, becoming one of the most debated episodes in Simpsons history. Fans noted that the episode's resolution, everyone agreeing to never mention it again, doesn't work if it revealed real history. The theory gained support when viewers observed that subsequent episodes treat Tamzarian as a never having happened, suggesting collective recognition that they witnessed Skinner's breakdown rather than identity revelation. Mental health professionals noted that the episode's events match dissociative episode patterns, where stressed individuals create elaborate false histories as escape from present reality. The evidence becomes clear in how the episode progresses. Skinner's identity revelation comes during a moment of extreme stress. He's facing yet another humiliation from Superintendent Chalmers, yet another failure to meet expectations, yet another reminder of his inadequacy. In this moment of peak stress, he suddenly claims he's not Seymour Skinner, but Armin Tamzarian, a street kid who assumed a dead man's identity. This story is too perfect. It explains all his failures by claiming he's an imposter who was never meant to succeed. It's not revelation, it's psychological break manifesting as identity confusion. Most telling is how convenient the story is for Skinner. Every failure of his career, every disappointment of his life, gets explained away if he's really Tamzarian. He hasn't failed as Seymour Skinner, he's succeeded remarkably as Armin Tamzarian, playing a role he was never meant for. The delusion protects him from confronting his actual inadequacy by reframing his entire life as heroic performance by an imposter. This cognitive restructuring is classic psychological defense mechanism in people facing identity crises. The theory explains Springfield's unanimous decision to forget the revelation. If Skinner revealed real secret, people would have varied reactions. Instead, everyone instantly agrees to suppress it and never mention it again. This unified response only makes sense if they collectively recognize they'd witnessed Principal Skinner having a psychotic break and decided the merciful response was to pretend it never happened, rather than force him into psychiatric care. Judge Snyder's legal order preventing anyone from mentioning it represents community conspiracy to protect Skinner from consequences of his mental health crisis. Agnes Skinner's response also supports this interpretation. She plays along with his delusion initially, then helps shut it down. A real mother whose son revealed such deception would have authentic emotional response. Agnes treats it like managing a crisis, not processing revelation. She knows her son is having a breakdown and participates in collective decision to deny it happened. Her continued treatment of him as Seymour afterward confirms the Tamzarian story was never real. It was Seymour's temporary psychotic break. Most damning is how Skinner himself responds afterward. He never again references being Tamzarian. He fully returns to Seymour identity with no transition or integration of his claimed real identity. Someone who'd lived as imposter for years, then revealed. Truth couldn't simply stop being Tamzarian and fully re-embrace Skinner identity overnight. The complete abandonment of Tamzarian identity proves it was never real. It was a brief dissociative episode that ended when his psychological crisis resolved. The episode's controversial status among fans reflects this interpretation's accuracy. Fans hate the episode because it feels wrong. And it feels wrong because we're watching psychological breakdown, not clever plot twist. The show's subsequent refusal to reference it isn't retcon. It's Springfield's agreed-upon response to having witnessed their principal's public psychotic episode. They've all decided to forget it happened as kindness to someone who came back from temporary insanity. This interpretation suggests Springfield didn't cover up truth. They collectively handled a principal's public breakdown by pretending it never occurred, choosing communal denial over forcing Skinner to face that his stress level drove him to temporarily lose connection with reality. But if Skinner had a breakdown, perhaps Superintendent Chalmers knows more than he admits. What if Superintendent Chalmers' famous Skinner outbursts aren't surprise, but frustration at having to constantly cover for an incompetent principal he can't fire due to their shared military service? This theory suggests that Chalmers protects Skinner not from administrator oversight, but from well-deserved termination, maintaining him in position out of military loyalty rather than professional merit. Throughout the series, Chalmers displays a unique relationship with Skinner that goes beyond normal supervisor-subordinate dynamics, suggesting obligations that supersede educational administration. This theory gained traction around 2010 to 2011, when fans began analyzing the Chalmers-Skinner dynamic through the lens of military culture and its emphasis on unit loyalty. The theory developed when viewers noted that Chalmers always arrives during Skinner's disasters, but never actually fires him, despite accumulating evidence of profound incompetence. Military veterans participating in these discussions recognized the pattern. Chalmers treats Skinner like a fellow serviceman he's duty-bound to protect, even when that protection harms the school and students. The evidence becomes clear when examining their shared history. Both served in Vietnam, creating military bond that supersedes their professional relationship. In military culture, you protect your unit members. Period. This loyalty doesn't end with discharge. Many veterans maintain lifelong protective relationships with those they served alongside. Chalmers' inability to fire Skinner despite overwhelming cause stems from this military obligation. He cannot abandon a fellow veteran regardless of how much that veteran fails in civilian role. In Skinner's Sense of Snow and countless other episodes, we see Chalmers arriving during disasters at Springfield Elementary. The school faces fire code violations, educational failures, physical infrastructure collapse, and Skinner's personal incompetence. Each time, Chalmers witnesses evidence warranting termination, yet Skinner remains employed. Any superintendent motivated by educational outcomes would have fired him years ago. Chalmers keeps him because military loyalty trumps educational administration. He's protecting his unit member, not serving students. Most telling is the famous steamed ham sequence. Chalmers arrives for lunch at Skinner's house and immediately encounters obvious deception. Skinner claims to be cooking steamed hams while smoke pours from his kitchen, clearly lying about a fire. Chalmers knows he's being lied to, but plays along, ultimately accepting the deception and leaving without confronting Skinner's obvious dishonesty. This pattern, witnessing failure and deception while choosing to accept it rather than enforce accountability, defines their relationship. Chalmers consistently lets Skinner's failures slide because he's protecting him, not supervising him. The theory explains why Chalmers' frustration manifests as exasperation rather than administrative action. His Skinner outbursts express genuine frustration at having to cover for someone he knows is failing, but he never converts that frustration into termination, because doing so would violate military code. He's stuck between his duty as educator to serve students and his duty as veteran to protect his unit. The stress of this conflict emerges as irritation, but his ultimate choice is always protecting Skinner over protecting students. Springfield Elementary's systemic failures support this interpretation. The school should have been shut down years ago for safety violations, educational failures, and administrative incompetence. It continues operating only because Chalmers actively protects it from district oversight that would reveal Skinner's inadequacy. He covers up inspection failures, explains away poor test scores, and prevents serious investigation into school conditions. This protection allows Springfield Elementary to persist as educational disaster zone, while Chalmers sacrifices student welfare to honor military brotherhood. Most damning is what this costs Springfield's children. They receive inadequate education in dangerous facilities under incompetent administration because Chalmers values his military loyalty over their welfare. Every failure Skinner commits that Chalmers covers up represents students harmed by misplaced loyalty. The children pay for Chalmers' decision to protect his fellow veteran rather than serve his actual responsibility as education administrator. This interpretation transforms Chalmers from incompetent supervisor into tragic enabler, sacrificing Springfield's children's education and safety to honor military brotherhood with a fellow veteran who should have been fired years ago but remains protected by shared service bond. Speaking of sacrificing children, Mrs. Krabappel's bitterness might stem from darker origins. What if Edna Krabappel's cynicism and desperate pursuit of male attention aren't character flaws, but trauma responses from an abusive marriage that destroyed her optimistic teaching dreams? This theory suggests that Edna's entire personality, her bitterness, her drinking, her need for validation, stems from surviving domestic violence that broke her spirit and left her seeking safety and approval in increasingly desperate ways. Throughout the series, Edna displays classic markers of abuse survival: hypervigilance in relationships, self-medication through alcohol, desperate need for male approval, and complete abandonment of earlier ambitions and self-worth. This theory emerged in discussions after Marsha Wallace's death in 2013, when fans reflected on Edna's character and began analyzing her behavior through trauma-informed frameworks. The theory gained support when viewers cataloged references to her ex-husband and noted that her entire personality suggests someone recovering from severe psychological abuse. Domestic violence counselors participating in these discussions recognized Edna's pattern. Survivor of abuse who learned she has no value except through male attention, turning to substance abuse and bitterness as coping mechanisms. The evidence becomes clear when examining references to Edna's past. She occasionally mentions her ex-husband in ways suggesting the marriage was traumatic. She never speaks positively about him. She describes her marriage as a mistake that changed her life trajectory. She references that she once had dreams and optimism that are now completely gone. This isn't normal divorce bitterness. It's trauma from relationship that destroyed her sense of self and possibility. In episodes focusing on Edna's personal life, we see desperate attempts to find male validation. She places personal ads, pursues inappropriate relationships, and accepts treatment from men that reflects deep insecurity about her worth. This desperation isn't just loneliness. It's trauma-based belief that she only has value if men want her. Abuse victims often internalize that their worth depends on pleasing others, particularly romantic partners. Edna's relationship patterns show someone who learned her value comes from male approval, seeking validation to counter internalized messages of worthlessness her abuser implanted. Most telling is Edna's drinking. She regularly appears drinking alone, references alcohol consumption, and uses drinking to cope with stress. This self-medication pattern is common in trauma survivors who never received proper mental health treatment. She drinks to numb emotional pain from both her past abuse and her current loneliness. The alcohol helps her avoid processing trauma, but keeps her trapped in a cycle of depression and poor decision-making regarding men. The theory explains Edna's teaching burnout. She once presumably became a teacher because she cared about education and wanted to help children. By the time we meet her, that idealism is completely dead. She openly expresses contempt for her students, does minimal work, and clearly gave up on teaching as a meaningful career. This transformation from idealistic new teacher to burned-out cynic matches what happens when trauma destroys someone's sense of purpose. Her ex-husband's abuse didn't just destroy her marriage, it destroyed her belief that she can make a difference or that her work matters. Edna's relationship with Ned Flanders takes on deeper meaning with this interpretation. She pursues relationship with Ned because he represents everything her ex-husband wasn't: gentle, kind, respectful, emotionally stable. She's drawn to Ned specifically because he's safe, not because they're compatible. After surviving abuse, she needs safety more than passion. Ned represents relationship where she won't be hurt, where someone will treat her well. Her attraction to him is trauma-based, seeking protection from someone who won't harm her. Most damning is that Springfield offers Edna no support. No one suggests therapy for her drinking. No one addresses her obvious depression and bitterness. No one recognizes her behavior as trauma response requiring professional help. She's surrounded by people who see her as joke, bitter teacher who drinks too much and chases men desperately. They don't see her as abuse survivor struggling to function without support or treatment, continuing to deteriorate while no one intervenes. The theory suggests Edna's entire personality, the bitterness, the drinking, the desperate need for male approval, stems from surviving domestic abuse that destroyed her optimistic early life and teaching dreams, leaving her trapped in a cycle of self-medication and seeking validation, while Springfield mistakes her trauma symptoms for personality flaws. But if Edna was a victim, perhaps Otto is hiding his own victimization. What if Otto Mann's laid-back personality isn't coolness, but permanent brain damage from years of heavy drug use that's left him with the cognitive function of a teenager? This theory suggests that Otto's inability to manage adult responsibilities, his childish decision-making, and his perpetual adolescent behavior stem from neurological damage that prevents normal adult cognitive function. Throughout the series, Otto displays specific impairments consistent with long-term drug-induced brain damage: memory problems, inability to plan or make responsible decisions, emotional immaturity, and complete failure to achieve normal adult milestones. This theory developed around 2012 to 2013 when fans began analyzing Otto's behavior through medical frameworks and noting that his pattern matches substance-induced cognitive impairment rather than personality choice. The theory gained support when viewers cataloged Otto's inability to function independently despite being an adult in his 30s or 40s. Medical professionals and addiction counselors in these discussions noted that Otto's specific deficits match those seen in long-term drug users who've caused permanent neurological damage. The evidence becomes clear when examining Otto's living situation. He lives in his bus because he cannot maintain housing. This isn't financial. Bus drivers earn enough to rent apartments. It's cognitive. Otto cannot manage the responsibilities of maintaining a residence, paying rent on schedule, following rules, maintaining cleanliness, planning ahead. These executive function tasks are beyond his capability, suggesting frontal lobe damage that prevents adult planning and responsibility. He lives in a bus not by choice, but because it's the only way he can survive given his impaired cognition. In episodes revealing Otto's past, we see heavy drug use references that early seasons made explicit before later seasons toned down. Otto used drugs extensively, likely starting in adolescence and continuing into adulthood. This drug use during critical brain development periods can cause permanent damage to regions responsible for planning, impulse control, and emotional regulation. Otto's current functioning matches exactly what we'd expect from someone who damaged their developing brain through chronic substance abuse. Most revealing is Otto's employment driving children. He operates a school bus while displaying obvious cognitive impairment. He makes poor decisions, shows impaired judgment, and sometimes operates the vehicle while possibly still impaired. Any normal screening process would disqualify him. That Springfield Elementary employs him suggests either no screening or such desperate teacher shortage that they accept anyone willing to do the job. Either way, Otto's employment demonstrates systemic failure to protect children from impaired adult. The theory explains why Otto never progresses in life. Most people in their 30s or 40s show some life advancement: relationships, career development, financial stability, adult milestones. Otto shows none. He remains frozen at adolescent development level despite his chronological age. This isn't Peter Pan syndrome or refusing to grow up. It's inability to grow up because his brain cannot develop beyond its damaged state. The neurological structures needed for adult cognitive function are impaired or destroyed. Otto's relationship patterns also support this interpretation. He cannot maintain romantic relationships because he lacks the emotional maturity and planning capability they require. His interactions with others remain superficial and teenager-like. He relates to students because his cognitive and emotional level matches theirs more than it matches other adults. His friendships are similarly immature, focused on immediate gratification without depth or long-term thinking. Most damning is Springfield's acceptance of Otto's impairment. Everyone can see he's not fully functional, but no one intervenes or gets him evaluated. They treat his cognitive deficits as personality quirks, rather than medical condition requiring treatment. He drives their children daily while clearly impaired, and they accept this as normal. Their failure to protect their children or help Otto reveals community-wide dysfunction where brain-damaged drug casualty is entrusted with children's safety without anyone questioning it. The theory transforms Otto from lovable stoner into cautionary tale, a brain-damaged drug casualty who shouldn't be trusted with children's lives, but remains employed because Springfield lacks the systemic competence to identify and address his permanent neurological impairment. If Otto is damaged from drugs, perhaps Professor Frink's intelligence is equally destructive. What if Professor Frink's constant stream of impossible inventions isn't genius, but the result of horrific human experimentation that Springfield's residents have learned to ignore? This theory suggests that the scientific advances Frink demonstrates regularly require human testing that violates every ethical standard, with Springfield accepting the casualties as normal price of having a local mad scientist. Throughout the series, Frink's inventions regularly endanger or harm Springfield residents, yet he faces no consequences, suggesting either community has normalized his unethical research or they're aware his work requires human subjects they've tacitly agreed to provide. This theory emerged around 2015 to 2016, when fans began noting that Frink's inventions appear without explanation of how he developed or tested them, and the ethical implications of his work are never addressed. The theory gained support when viewers cataloged how many Frink inventions obviously required human testing to develop, noting that such testing would be completely illegal without ethical review and informed consent. Research ethicists and scientists participating in these discussions observed that Frink's work reflects the kind of unethical human experimentation that scandalized medical history. Experiments conducted without regard for subject welfare in pursuit of scientific advancement. The evidence becomes clear when examining Frink's inventions. He creates devices that modify human consciousness, alter physical structure, manipulate biology, and interface with human neurology. Developing such technologies requires extensive human testing. You cannot create working brain-computer interface without testing it in human brains. You cannot develop consciousness transfer technology without experimenting on human consciousness. Yet Frink presents completed inventions without acknowledging the human experimentation necessary to develop them. In episodes featuring Frink's father, we learn that Frink's father was also a scientist whose experiments drove him mad. This family history suggests that ethical violations run in the family, with young Frink watching his father conduct experiments that probably included human subjects and learning that the scientific ends justify any means. Frink inherited not just his father's intelligence, but his complete disregard for human welfare in pursuit of knowledge. Most telling is Springfield's response when Frink's inventions cause harm. People get injured, consciousness gets scrambled, bodies get modified without consent, yet no one sues Frink, reports him to authorities, or demands oversight of his work. This acceptance only makes sense if Springfield has collectively agreed that Frink's contributions outweigh the casualties, essentially allowing him to conduct human experimentation without ethics review, because they benefit from the technologies he produces. The theory explains why Frink has no institutional oversight. Real scientists work in institutions with ethics boards, review processes, and accountability structures. Frink operates independently with no oversight whatsoever. He can conduct any experiment on anyone without approval or consequences. This lack of oversight, combined with his advanced research output, suggests he's conducting the kind of unethical experimentation that legitimate institutions would never allow, and achieving results precisely because he's willing to violate ethics other scientists respect. Springfield's acceptance of Frink's work mirrors historical periods when human experimentation faced minimal oversight. Like Nazi medical experiments, American radiation testing, or Tuskegee syphilis study, Frink's work advances by treating human subjects as expendable resources rather than people deserving protection. The difference is that Springfield community appears to accept this arrangement, suggesting collective decision to allow unethical experimentation in exchange for scientific progress. Most damning is what this suggests about Springfield's values. They've essentially decided that some residents are acceptable losses for scientific advancement. When Frink needs test subjects, someone volunteers or gets volunteered. When experiments harm people, community accepts those casualties as price of progress. This creates two-tier system, those protected from experimentation and those used as research subjects, with no ethics review to prevent exploitation. The theory suggests Frink isn't Springfield's quirky scientist, but it's Joseph Mengele, conducting experiments without consent or ethical oversight, while everyone looks away because they benefit from his results, creating an environment where mad science flourishes through human sacrifice. But if Frink is mad, perhaps Dr. Hibbert's constant laughter hides his own madness. What if Dr. Hibbert's signature inappropriate laughter isn't a quirk, but a psychological defense mechanism he developed to cope with decades of medical malpractice and patient deaths? This theory suggests that Hibbert laughs at terrible diagnoses and medical disasters because his psyche cannot process the accumulation of harm he's caused through incompetence. Throughout series, Hibbert displays behavioral patterns suggesting severe dissociation from consequences of his medical practice, inappropriate affect, avoidance of emotional engagement with patients, and inability to take medical situations seriously even when discussing death or serious injury. This theory gained support around 2011 to 2012 when fans began cataloging Hibbert's inappropriate laughter timing and noting that it specifically occurs when discussing medical failures, bad diagnoses, or patient suffering. The theory developed when viewers recognized that laughter in response to others' pain typically indicates either sociopathy or psychological defense mechanism, protecting someone from guilt they cannot process. Medical professionals and psychologists in these discussions noted that Hibbert's pattern matches dissociation seen in doctors who've caused patient harm and cannot integrate that reality without psychological breakdown. The evidence becomes clear when examining when Hibbert laughs. It's not random comedy timing. It's specifically triggered by medical information that should provoke concern, sympathy, or professional seriousness. He laughs when telling Homer about potentially fatal conditions. He laughs discussing surgical complications. He laughs describing patient deaths. This inappropriate affect indicates either complete lack of empathy or psychological mechanism preventing him from emotionally processing the medical information he's delivering. In episodes focusing on Hibbert's medical practice, we see consistent evidence of substandard care. He misses obvious diagnoses, provides outdated medical advice, and makes treatment errors that harm patients. Yet he never faces malpractice suits, license challenges, or professional consequences. This immunity from accountability suggests either systematic cover-up or patient population too unsophisticated to recognize when they're receiving incompetent care. Either way, Hibbert has operated for years, causing harm without consequences, allowing his malpractice to accumulate without professional or legal accountability. Most revealing is how Hibbert introduces medical information. When delivering bad news, he treats it as entertainment, finding humor in patients' suffering or poor prognoses. A doctor with normal empathy shows concern when discussing serious illness. Hibbert laughs and makes jokes, suggesting either sociopathic lack of empathy or psychological need to distance himself from emotional reality of harming patients through his incompetence. The laughter serves as barrier preventing him from feeling guilt about patient outcomes. The theory explains Hibbert's continued practice despite evident incompetence. He should have been reported to medical board, sued for malpractice, or lost his license years ago. But if his laughter prevents him from taking his failures seriously, he never learns from mistakes or changes his practice. He continues making the same errors while psychologically protected from consequences by his dissociative response. The laughter isn't just a defense mechanism for dealing with patient suffering. It's what allows him to continue practicing despite body count from his incompetence. Springfield's acceptance of Hibbert also supports this interpretation. They know he's inappropriate and makes medical errors, yet he remains their primary physician. This suggests either no alternatives exist or they've collectively decided to accept substandard medical care rather than confront that their doctor is incompetent and has been harming them for years. Acknowledging Hibbert's malpractice would require acknowledging their own victimization, so they accept his inappropriate behavior and poor care rather than face that reality. Most damning is what Hibbert's laughter obscures: the actual patient suffering he's caused. Every misdiagnosis, every treatment error, every patient harmed by his incompetence represents real suffering that his laughter dismisses as trivial. He's psychologically protected himself from recognizing the harm he's caused, while his victims bear consequences of his failures without justice or acknowledgement. The theory transforms Dr. Hibbert from cheerful physician into haunted doctor who laughs to avoid confronting the body count from decades of incompetence, using inappropriate affect as psychological shield against guilt he cannot process without complete breakdown. Don't forget to subscribe if you're enjoying this series. What if Apu's willingness to work 24/7 and tolerate constant robbery isn't immigrant work ethic, but desperation from unstable immigration status that keeps him trapped in exploitation? This theory suggests that Apu's extreme work hours, tolerance of abuse, and inability to leave his exploitative job stem from immigration fears that prevent him from asserting rights or seeking better employment. Throughout the series, Apu displays behavioral patterns consistent with undocumented immigrants or those with precarious legal status: acceptance of illegal working conditions, inability to report crimes affecting him, tolerance of abuse, and fear of authority that suggests his immigration status hangs by a thread. This theory emerged in discussions around immigration episodes, particularly Much Apu About Nothing, which directly addresses immigration panic and Apu's citizenship struggles. The theory gained support when viewers noted that Apu's behavior throughout the series matches documented patterns of immigrant exploitation, working impossible hours for low pay, accepting conditions citizens would refuse, and remaining silent about workplace violations because speaking up could threaten his status. That's the power of long-running media. It creates such vast archives of content that fans can construct elaborate theories supported by actual episodes. If you enjoyed this exploration of The Simpsons' strangest and most disturbing fan theories, Make sure to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into your favorite shows. Thanks for watching.